All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're tackling something every single one of us is feeling right now. I'm talking about that undeniable, absolute structural shock at the checkout counter. You know exactly what I mean, right? You go to buy your usual everyday items and suddenly the numbers just do not make sense anymore. So today, we're going to unpack the actual mechanics behind this phenomenon.
So why does everything cost so much more lately? Seriously, think about the last time you checked a long grocery receipt or pulled up your bank app after paying the month's bills. It's like this sudden shockwave of rising costs hitting you all at once. And it's not just the price of a carton of eggs. It's rent, it's the fuel in your car, it's the utilities keeping your lights on. The cost of just existing seems to have skyrocketed practically overnight, and it's leaving a lot of us feeling incredibly frustrated and, frankly, searching for answers.
Now, the headlines love to tell us that this is just your standard run-of-the-mill inflation, just a normal part of the economic cycle. But when we look closer at the source material, it becomes pretty clear that something feels different this time. And that's because this price explosion we're experiencing, it's structural. It's a deeper issue that's woven into the very fabric of our global economy. In this explainer, we're going to investigate the hidden mechanics that are actively draining your wallet's value, and we'll peel back the curtain to show you exactly how it's happening.
Suspect number 1, supply chain bottlenecks. Let's track how the physical, real-world movement of goods across the globe directly impacts the final prices you and I pay at the register. To really grasp why things are so ridiculously expensive, you have to follow the product's journey. Whether it's the smartphone in your pocket or just a simple bag of coffee, in our hyper-globalized world, these products rely on a crazy complex web of logistics. They start out as raw materials, they travel through global shipping lanes like the Suez Canal on massive cargo ships, and eventually they end up on the consumer shelf. But here is the major problem. When just a single link in this chain breaks, say a blockage in a major shipping lane or a sudden geopolitical conflict, the cost of transportation absolutely skyrockets. These aren't just standard operating costs anymore. They are massive bottlenecks completely choking the system.
And that perfectly illustrates the concept of the domino effect. Every single time a cargo ship is forced to wait an extra week at a port, or a factory suddenly faces a shortage of components, a domino falls. The costs accumulate so fast, and where do you think those accumulated costs go? They get pushed right down the line, eventually landing squarely on the final price tag for the consumer. We are at the very end of this line, absorbing the financial impact of every delay and shortage that happened thousands of miles away.
Which brings us to a really pivotal question, and our second suspect, the greedflation phenomenon.
You have to objectively ask, are rising prices purely about these physical logistical costs, or is there something else happening entirely behind the closed doors of corporate boardrooms? The data in our sources outlines a trend that sparked intense debate, often called greedflation. The evidence suggests that while the cost for raw materials and transportation absolutely did rise, a lot of massive corporations didn't just pass those exact costs along. Instead, they kept prices disproportionately high or even raised them further, specifically to expand their own profit margins. It's essentially a scenario where global chaos was turned into a record-breaking profit machine.
When you run the numbers, you end up with this massive, stark contrast. While everyday consumer prices are climbing steeply, multi-billion-dollar corporate profit margins are actually climbing even higher and way faster. We are objectively looking at the data here, and it tells a pretty undeniable story. The everyday consumer's struggle to afford the absolute basics has, in a lot of cases, translated directly into massive financial gains for corporate shareholders. It is a critical piece of the structural puzzle we're putting together today.
And that brings us to our third and final suspect, devaluation and money supply. Let's zoom out from the shipping lanes and the corporate boardrooms for a second, straight into the macro engine room of the economy. We need to examine the invisible forces of monetary policy. So what exactly happens when new money is printed? Well, you get devaluation, which is the decline in a currency's purchasing power. This happens mechanically when the supply of money circulating in the economy increases faster than the actual physical supply of goods and services. Think of it like this. When cash becomes significantly more abundant because the printing presses are running hot, but the amount of actual stuff you can buy stays exactly the same, the purchasing power of every individual dollar inevitably shrinks. Because of this, the actual value of a single dollar rapidly decreases. If you're just sitting on cash while the overarching money supply rapidly expands, you are essentially losing value every single day, even if you never spend a dime. Your bank balance might look exactly the same, but what that money can actually buy diminishes. This dynamic functions as a super powerful, invisible tax. And because it silently erodes the purchasing power of regular wages and standard savings, it's an invisible tax that disproportionately hits the middle class the hardest.
The mindset shift.
So, as we enter this new era, characterized by price explosions and monetary devaluation, the old rules of personal finance are changing. Simply saving your money in a traditional bank account is just not enough to protect you anymore. To actually survive and thrive in this environment, the sources point to a three-step survival strategy. First, you've got to focus on increasing your own personal value and earning potential. Second, you must look at diversifying your wealth into hard assets, things that hold intrinsic value even when paper currency is fluctuating wildly. And third, you have to really understand these systemic shifts. To stay ahead of the curve, you've got to stop playing the game like a passive consumer who just accepts higher prices and start thinking critically, like an investor.
Which leaves us with one final, critical question to ponder as we wrap up. Are you ready to reclaim your financial independence? The world has fundamentally changed, and the hidden mechanics we've explored today are constantly at work in the background of our daily lives. But recognizing and understanding these mechanics, from global supply bottlenecks to monetary policy, is the absolute first step toward mastering these systemic shifts. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. The economic mechanics are in motion. So the only question is, will you sit back and let them quietly drain your wallet? Or will you learn how to use them to your advantage? I'll see you next time.